And here we will see the case where there is an apparent attempt by this administration to bypass organized labor and to try to speak directly to workers, which is akin to or close to union busting. And our comrades in the Public Workers Union can speak to that. For the past 20 or so months, they have been almost unsuccessful in meeting with the relevant ministers to discuss their issues. Our comrades in the GUT, who speaks highly of the administration for what they have done, can tell you that they're having difficulties in meeting with the ministries and the officials in the Ministry of Labor. And it's impossible to blame the ministers without blaming the government, because the ministers are part of the cabinet. And therefore, we had to call a spade a spade. As we stand here today, the GTUC extends its deepest, profound condolences to the families, relatives, and friends who mourn the untimely passing of a young, innocent, then full of life school child, Esther Patterson of Carriacou. The GTUC demands that no stones be left unturned in bringing the perpetrator or perpetrators of this gruesome crime to justice. We have to protect everyone, but especially our young kids. This May Day takes place in a historical period. It's the 50th anniversary of our independence. However, we must note that despite the fact that it is undeniable of Labor's contribution to our 50 years of independence, political independence, because we still have a long way to go. Labor, with this government that speaks so highly of labor, labor has been left out of any of the organized celebrations. And here we will see the case where there is an apparent attempt by this administration to bypass organized labor and to try to speak directly to workers, which is akin to or close to union busting. And our comrades in the Public Workers Union can speak to that. For the past 20 or so months, they have been almost unsuccessful in meeting with the relevant ministers to discuss their issues. Our comrades in the GUT, who speaks highly of the administration for what they have done, can tell you that they're having difficulties in meeting with the ministries and the officials in the Ministry of Labor. And it's impossible to blame the ministers without blaming the government, because the ministers are part of the cabinet. And therefore, we had to call a spade a spade. Comrades, our independence has been strongly influenced by the 1951 Grenada Revolution. That revolution then led by a working class hero, Eric Matthew Geary, who then, through the GMMIW, were able to break the color and race barrier in Grenada. We are able to have a dark-skinned prime minister today, and we are able to have dark-skinned persons working in the banks and other places, thanks to that 1951 struggle, when our people were not allowed to work in frontline organizations. The trade union movement has led the struggle for benefits and contribution to nation building through results such as the formation of political parties, paid annual vacation leave, paid maternity leave, severance pay, among others that have already been highlighted. I'm going to concise my address I've said. And therefore, I wish to focus on what I call the industrial relations climate, because this will be important for us. The Grenada Trades Union Council is watching what appears to be the possible signs of dark labor relations clouds appearing on the industrial relations horizon. The government continue, and I repeat, the government continue to exploit the workers by violating Section 29(5) of the Employment Act by refusing to immediately making contract workers permanent. As a matter of fact, the current Prime Minister, a then leading corporate lawyer, said during the campaign struggle that contract work was illegal, Imani workers were illegal, and therefore by the stroke of a pen, you'll be made permanent. Why are we perpetrating the violation of a law? Why are we perpetrating that? We can deliver on big ticket items, but when it comes to the ordinary man and woman, where people looking for job security, it is taking forever to be done. The question that must be answered by my colleagues is whether or not the money workers are made permanent, is whether or not the contract workers are made permanent. If the answer is yes, then you have fulfilled your promises. If the answer is no, then you have failed. And for us in the labor movement, these are significant, because these comrades need to be able to go to a financial institution to help better their living standards. So comrades, let us examine the industrial climate. As I said, let us look at the small items, because the small items will determine how serious an employer or an administration is for working class people. Because if we ignore one individual or exploit one individual because it will not make much news, and we continue to do the big ticket items for the sake of news, then we are failing. We look at the matter of the Carriacou 5. Immediately after assuming office in 2022, 5 workers in Carriacou were either transferred or terminated illegally. And up to now, our comrades in the Public Workers Union cannot get this matter addressed. Comrade Grimes, am I correct? Yes, ma'am. And I'm saying this so that we can go down to the ground. You know, I remember looking back at home that there is always, in our home, there was what we call a calendar. And on that calendar, whether you believe in a Jesus or not, there was this Jesus. I reject the color today, but he had one sheep in his hand. And it was said, a good shepherd look after one lost sheep. And that is important for us in the labor movement. The continued blatant refusal of the ministers of government to engage the respective trade union is a cause for concern. And I can tell you that there is a level of arrogancy developing where comrades, and I call them comrades because a number of colleagues in the government, we are colleagues. Let me make that point. But on the basis that union leaders are speaking out, they are refusing to meet with the union leaders because they hold the view that once you stand up and speak publicly, we are not engaging with you. And I challenge most to question that. Comrades, industrial climate, the private sector. The private sector, Comrade Juice Mason, who openly declared his support for the political party, and we always commend him for that, made an important observation, which is our observation, that it was under the NDC administration between 2008 and 2012, 13, that the vicious attack on workers' private and profit sharing started with the current Grenada breweries, when the workers were locked out for 60-something days. Locked out for 60-something days. And the government, in our view, and in our engagement with the government, seemed to have allowed the private sector to do as they like. Colleagues, I'll tell you, it appears as though that is every time the NDC is in office, the private sector feels emboldened to look to go after certain basic rights of the workers. Now we have Hubbards. Now we have Hubbards trying to take away the profit of CIW workers. We have Citizens Paints, for the first time, represented by the Technical and Allied Workers Union, going after the workers' profit share that we represent. And I'll tell you, it is known, Grenada is small, that some of these private sectors may not necessarily be buddy-buddy with the government in terms of political parties. But what it speaks about is the class interest. It speaks about the class interest, that they do not see political colors, but they look at the philosophy of the government in office and determines when they can strike. So for instance, and I want you to think about the following. In November of 2022, when the brave and courageous workers of the Grenada Port Authority stood up in defense of their sister, who was terminated on the basis that she was not performing, For the first time in our recent history, the private sector organization wrote a press release calling on the government to intervene and force the workers back to work, to intervene and change the laws, some of the very said laws that the government is now speaking about, a unilateral attempt to change in terms of the dispute resolution process. And I could tell you that these that they speak about were advanced and many times fought for by the private sector. The hotels in the South, when the corporate lawyer was defending them, has been checking the government to make those changes. This is what they are trying to bring on the books. Because you know why? We have been told in the past that there are a number of foreign investors who are bypassing Grenada because workers are going on strike too easy. But I'll tell you, the fundamental difference between a slave and a free man is our ability to withdraw our labor. And whatever law there is will always be guided by this. So as our comrade Mason had a word of advice to the administration, we are saying, tread carefully. We are always prepared to work along with government and the private sector. If you look at where we have had industrial disputes, you would recognize that it is in very few workplaces that we have had to take the streets. But just as how Donald Trump has done in the United States, where he packed up the Supreme Court with judges with a particular ideological outlook, the private sector is trying to get this government to make certain legislative changes that will give them what they call the upper hand. Because even if and when there are laws in place to address arbitration, and when arbitration should be final and binding, because the employer's pocket is deep, they can find ways and means of tying up these matters in the court. And the only thing that we have, or one of the only things that we have, is our labor power. And we use this, and we use this with great judgment. Comrades, the private sector, and those that we speak about, the Hubbards, the Sissons, the Grenada Bureaus. And if we are not careful, they will go after Grenada, but I know Grenada is a different kettle of fish, where Grenada has profit sharing. And the question and the issue of non-contributory pension, let me spend a time on this. What is wrong? Tell me what is wrong with workers benefiting from non-contributory pension when it is through the labor power that the businesses are operating? Capitalists and managers and ministers, sometimes we say get toe-to-toe benefits. Yes, but there is an attempt to say that because we are not directly contributing to pension, we should lose it or change it. So in some of the statutory bodies, attempts have been made to change these non-contributory benefits. But these are part of the package of the workers' benefit. What these companies have not done, what these statutory bodies have not done, they were not financially prudent to put aside, make a provision for these pension and these past service benefits. They squandered our monies. These statutory bodies, they squandered our monies. Yes, in all sort of investments. All kind of benefits to some of their board members. And then, now that they are running into difficulties, they are now trying to blame us. And I encourage any of my colleagues there, do a historical research. I know this current administration will tell us don't hold them responsible for what was done in the past. But remember, we are celebrating 50 years of independence today. So we are building on the past. And if we do not understand from whence we came and the sacrifices that we made, we are going to lose it. And therefore, my comrade leaders in the labor movement, I ask of all of us to engage in hard-nosed discussions among ourselves so that we could understand the history of what allowed us to have what we have. And I'm happy to hear, as the TUC have discussed, that when those who are telling us that we have to fight to restore the 1958 pension and to ensure that incumbent public officers do not lose those benefits, today are singing a different tune. I repeat, is singing a different tune. Government, let's look. Government has refused to pay the faith workers. The faith workers, the government has said, and I can't argue that a former minister, through some corrupt practice, although it is not proven, but let's say that's what they say, formed a company, employed workers, and therefore they shut the company down when they came into office. But these workers worked for about 2 months after the election, and they have not been paid. The Grenada Trades Union Council is saying go after the company, go after faith, go through the legal process, and if somebody has to pay, let the company pay. But it's ordinary working class people, many from St. Andrew, many from Marquis, many from Soubise, have not been paid. And if we are speaking that we are looking after workers, and we are spending millions of dollars for TAMCC workers, and millions of dollars for pensioners, what is it for a few $100,000, if so much, for ordinary workers? And we have a duty and an obligation to ensure that we call upon the state to pay these workers. They must not be politically victimized. They did not elect to employ themselves. They were employed by a company, and that company provided service to the state. The political victimization of the Carriacou Five. NDC is reneging and taking away of the $150 from elderly citizens of this country. And let's establish the following. Let's establish the following. I sat in December of 2023 during the budget debate in the Senate, and the then junior minister, I think she was, in the Ministry of Social Development, said the following, and I'm paraphrasing, not word for word, that the $150 was put on as an election gambit by the past administration. But this government, meaning the NDC, will make it a permanent $150, and the record is there. The record is there. I am not here to argue whether or not the NNP administration wanted to keep it on. It may very well be an election gambit. But there is no denying that this current administration said that it will be permanent. And yet still for these ordinary workers, they took it away. And I join in solidarity today with Comrade John Rollo, one of the victims of this inhuman act, in demanding a restoration of the 150 and the retroactive amount that is due. That's a fact. It was promised. It was said that this government will make it fix 150. We are looking on the horizon on the possible attempt to unilaterally amend, as I say, the labor code, to have what in effect may result in what we call forced arbitration, right? Because I can tell you, I've heard here what has gone up and what has been recommended and what may be accepted. But at the level of the Labor Advisory Board, we have not had finality. I want to repeat that, because I know that there is an expectation that will be quiet. As a matter of fact, I'm aware of these recommendations, that we'll be quiet and we should not go out and speak. Only to recognize that this is advance, and it may have gone to cabinet. It may have gone to cabinet. If it has not gone, if the recommendations have not been gone, I stand corrected. But what I do know, listening to the pronouncement of the minister, when she says that the amendments to the dispute resolution will be done, there's another attempt. And because you are workers, and this is Working Class Day, and where ministers feel at liberty, as they have a right to speak about what they have done and what they intend to do, and bring into your attention how the horizon looks. There is an attempt to remove the Ministry of Labor from the dispute process. And I can tell you, we who have been in the vineyard, we who have been out in the battlefield with the private sector, those represented by the corporate lawyer who is in government today, have been always championing the cause for the Ministry of Labor to be excluded from the dispute resolution, because they accuse some ministers of labor, and I'm looking at one right here now, past Minister of Labor, had been too friendly to the working class. That is what drove them. And I can tell you, 2 months ago, in one of the larger hotels in the south that Tau visited to discuss the outstanding payment for workers who are no longer with them, that hotelier one of the largest hotels in the country, was lamenting the fact that the current government is taking too long to get the Ministry of Labor and the Minister of Labor out of the dispute process. Because you know why? They know they have money, that when election come, they can finance political parties and look for benefits. All that we have is one man, one vote. And they are afraid of our voting power. And they are afraid that when all things are equal, a progressive government and a progressive minister will and may make a decision to benefit a worker. So they want to remove the Ministry of Labor. And my comrade minister, and I call you comrade, and you know I do that, Minister for Labor. If you are true to all that has been proclaimed going back to our Grenada Revolution, and if you are true as a young pioneer, I ask you to look deep into what is being contemplated. What is the impact? We must not allow anyone who just come without understanding the foundation of our struggle and what has benefited us to just think that it is all designed to have industrial peace. Comrades, the approach by the current administration to streamline low-income workers from a great possibility of owning a low-income home that was donated to us by our Chinese comrades. There is no doubt that those who have to go to a bank stands a less chance of getting a loan to purchase one of these homes than under the existing conditions that were there before. We in the labor movement say, when people get the homes, they must pay. Housing authority should go after them to pay. But what is likely to happen is that the lower income bracket workers who will not traditionally qualify for a loan will not be able to own one of those low income houses. And what is possible to happen is that those who can afford it may own those homes, and it is possible, and I ask the ministry to look into this, they might be owning it through a third party. They might be getting people to front for them, right? Some of them may not even be living in Grenada, right, as they seek to buy up those homes. The government has continued to engage former private sector and private sector leaders who have a clear demonstration of being anti-worker to negotiate for them, to represent them on the statutory boards. And this all seems to be falling in plan, where the private sector is having more and more influence within the administration. St. George's University continued refusal to pay severance pay to the unvaccinated workers going back to July 2021. The SGU has lifted the vaccination mandate. So any Tom, Dick, and Harry can go to the school compound without being vaccinated, but yet still they refuse to allow the workers to come back to work. The workers have demanded severance pay, which is only fair. Now, if an employer does not have you engaged for close to 3 years, then in the reality, you are terminated. But the school does not want to use the word termination because they have been advised by the lawyer, check the law firm. The same thing that my comrade in Bank and General was saying that he's not brave enough as Tawu to say the corporate law firm. Check the history of the law firm and check what's been advising them over the years to fight workers and exploit workers. Check SGU. And I had the unfortunate experience. It was a very touching moment for me to experience an unvaccinated worker attending a meeting at SGU and having to walk out of the meeting after she broke down in tears when our local Grenadian law firm, in the manner in which they were speaking about our Grenadian workers who refused to take the vaccine, who had doubts about the vaccine, that worker broke down and she left. It was not done by the white Americans who sat in the room, but it was done by all local black Grenadians, which has a history in terms of our slave drivers. Yes, and who they put as blackface cards to bring across their messages. And it continues today. And it continues through some of our law firms. The GTUC calls for the following legislative changes: allowing workers to be able to take their matters to court. The Privy Council ruled on this, and it's just simple. It's just making an amendment. That's all TUC is calling for, which says that after the Ministry of Labor, if the matters are not resolved, the matters can be taken to the court. That's what the Privy Council said. We do not need further amendments. Amendment to 66.1, when it was under this administration, that the bureaus lock out workers under what they call reasonable time, and I dare say that under no other administration was any company able to successfully do this. And therefore, it begs into question the comfort level that the private sector is getting. The Banking Act relative to the sale of a business and successor employer, sexual harassment at the workplace, improved determination allowance under the Employment Act, and acting into domestic legislation, all the ILO convention to which Grenada has signed on to, legislations to address sexual abuse and exploitation of children, and the strengthening of legislation to address violence against women. Occupational safety and health at the workplace. On the question of minimum wage, we must salute the decisive approach taken by the Minister of Labour, Claudette Joseph, and the Ministry of Labour and the Government of Grenada to address this matter. So we salute you for this. However, you know there will be a however. Why is it necessary for the government, cabinet, to undo the recommendation of the Wages Advisory Committee as it relates to agricultural workers? When, for instance, the recommendation said, in other words, that an agricultural worker shall be guaranteed a minimum of 5 hours a day and shall be paid $60 for that 5 hours, which means that it is $12 an hour. But here what the government has done, in a high-handed manner, a campaign promise that they made right here in the parish of St. Patrick. When it was said that agricultural workers are not working hard enough and they must spend 8 hours on the farm. So what has the government done? The government has removed the 5 hours and says $60 a day. Now, if there is $60 a day and 8 hours in a day, it therefore means that it is $7.00 an hour. So agricultural workers' pay have been reduced. And I am aware that efforts have been made to have this matter addressed, and so far it has not yet been done. Public sector pension, our comrades have spoken on that. Our fight now is to ensure that all the unestablished workers, all the so-called contract workers who have worked side by side with what is called permanent workers, be they teachers, be they nurses, be they doctors, receive the same pension that established workers are receiving today, that pension which was restored. So before we can speak about anything going forward, we have a duty and an obligation to ensure that these workers who have labored side by side with the permanent workers get the same benefits. And that is our duty, and that is our commitment. A worker is a worker. My friend Claudette, Senator Claudette, you're highlighting my comrade and friend, Comrade Grimes, a number of occasions, and therefore, you know, it's solidarity in the movement, right? Let me say that our information on the ground, not what the ministers are saying, is that very few public officers have felt the impact of what they call regularization. As the cooks, as the orderlies, as some of the teachers, as the nurses, you know what they do? They have not made the nurses permanent. They have increased their salary, even without discussing the union, a violation of the ILO principle. So when you speak about bigging up the ILO, that's great. But let us respect collective bargaining, free collective bargaining, and recognize the role of organized labor. So don't go behind the union back. Don't refuse to speak to the public workers union, and go and meet with the nurses and doctors and increase their pay so that they will feel that the union is irrelevant. They are not made permanent. And we challenge the minister and the government to give us the numbers. They are speaking about close to 300 workers. What is preventing the stroke of a pen to saying that you are no longer considered to be contract or temporary, but you are permanent? A violation of Section 29.5 of the Employment Act. That's all that is required, as the current Prime Minister said when he was then campaigning. We look forward to genuine consultation. The Ministry of Health, we look forward to the increase in that service. Youth, we call for more emphasis to be placed on youth and to use sport as a vehicle. We make this call today for the government to make as a priority, top priority, a national transport service. What is preventing the government from getting some coasters or some other buses or going into an arrangement with some private sector owners and get them to run what we call the odd hours? We have our women folk, especially in the hospitality industries. Many of them exposed to all kinds of challenges and threats at night when they're uncaring employers, the hoteliers in the south, who are millionaires and billionaires, right, refuse to ensure that these workers, after working up to 10 and 11 in the night, are dropped at their home. They are dropping in Boucherjou and dropping in Redgate and in Venom and having to walk through the Granada forest and having to expose themselves. So, Comrade Minister, demonstrate to us that it's not just these matters that you met that the former administration did not address. Because the majority of matters that have been addressed are those that was on the political campaign train. Come and address the new ones. Give us national transport service so that our workers, after working, can be safely taken home. As a matter of fact, the private sector can do better. The private sector, these hoteliers can pay transport to drop the workers home because they have a duty of care. They will have to answer to the nation if heaven forbids that a hotel worker or any other worker, security guard, on the way from work meets in some unthinkable accident or crime. The Grenada Trade Union Council salutes the people and government of Cuba and expresses deepest heartfelt thanks and appreciation for your continued practical demonstration of solidarity. The Grenada Trade Union Council thanks the people and government of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and People's Republic of China for your continued assistance. The GTUC calls for the unconditional lifting of the embargoes against Cuba. The Grenada Trade Union Council calls for an end to violence in Haiti. The GTUC calls on immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza and calls on the United States, Britain, and Germany, among others, to stop providing Israel with the means that are used to kill innocent men, women, children, and infants. Comrades, many of our people cannot look at the international news. We feel a sense of helplessness. We must speak out, but we feel a sense of helplessness. As President Joe Biden and them speaks with forked tongues, and as he's facing an election here in the United States, all of a sudden, as though he's trying to help Gaza, while Israel killing on one side, they're building floating jetties on the other hand to bring in aid. So they're bringing in aid and giving Israel means to kill. We must condemn that and call them out. We thank the diaspora for your continued support. As we stand here today, comrades, at Fawn Plain Field, in the historic parish of St. Patrick, looking and gazing at Lippers Hill, GTUC is proud to have contributed positively to Grenada's national landscape. We stand in a parish of kings and queens, King Scholar, Queen Ashida, Queen Sinti, and all the others who have made their mark. Let us, dear comrades, workers all, continue to selfless fight for a better Grenada, uplifting the hard-working people of this, our little piece of rock. Let us forge forward in this fighting spirit, a fighting spirit bequeathed to us by our Carib brothers and sisters, who, rather than surrendering, fought to the last on Lippers Hill, where they were massacred. They did not jump to the death. They did not jump to the death, so we are in a historic landscape. A fighting spirit bequeathed to us by Julien Fedon. A fighting spirit bequeathed to us by the 1951 Eric Mathieu-led revolution in a blaze of sky red. And comrades, Cephas Chase, When you spoke, I'll be frank with you, I had to put on my glasses, which under the sun turns dark. I got emotional, comrade. And I listened to you, and I know the history of our struggle. And I know what you are facing. And I know in whose company those are looking to come after cement, blaming cement for the high cost of living. And not blaming the companies that continue to rake in millions of dollars in profit. If they want a decrease in the cost of living, let the private sector reduce their profit. Let them reduce their profit margin. So, comrade, I felt your concern. The Trade Union Council stands with you. A fighting spirit bequeathed to us by the Grenada Revolution of 1979. A revolution that continues to inspire us today in terms of our ideological and philosophical outlook. Many, it's interesting that certainly in this administration, we have to give them credit for that, at least in words. They continue to heap praise on the revolution. But we want to see a manifestation of the philosophy of the revolution. The revolution was not of just another society, but a just society. I remain eternally hopeful in the goodness of the working class, in the goodness of the masses. Let us, dear comrades all, further recommit ourselves to making Grenada and the world a better place. In the spirit of Julien Fedon, in the spirit and ideals of the Grenada Revolution, not a day without a struggle. Long live the Grenada Trades Union Council. Long live the working class. Workers of this world unite. Forward ever, backward never. Forward ever, backward never. Comrades, I thank you very much. Viva, viva Cuba, viva la revolución de Grenada. Long live.
Hi everyone, thanks for checking out the Bub Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG 10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.